Agenda item 2, we're going to consider a referral from Alderperson Pensacola for an update and discussion on the Safe Haven baby box. Jeff?
Well, there's been some progress. I guess I would invite Linda Casper up to the podium and she can bring the update. She seems to be spearheading all of this. Please push the button on the microphone and it'll light up green.
Is that it?
Perfect.
Okay. So thanks everybody who came tonight. I know that Jeff got us on the agenda, and I appreciate being able to give you guys an update. I know that hopefully most of you have seen the email that I sent on October 9th. And just for the record, we secured a third-party fiscal agent for the Baby Box project. Father Schaller, Dean of our local parishes, has agreed to hold and distribute the funds that are needed and the funds that we collect for the project at St. Peter and Paul Catholic Church. All the local priests have been informed about the Baby Box project, and along with Father Schaller, they're all very supportive. I spoke to Father Schaller, I guess it was Saturday afternoon, because I wanted to invite him to come tonight just to hear of any updates, because he and I are both kind of wondering, since that email went out on the 9th, where anything is at with the drafting of the memo of understanding, because he wants to get the ball rolling. So, and I don't know if maybe, I know Sue's not here tonight, maybe he's had side conversations with her. I don't know what she's done with Father Shell, if anything, just to give him a call and a courtesy call to let him know, that this was going on. I also met with the Knights of Columbus last Thursday night, and they, and as well as a lot of the other people in our community, are very supportive of installing the baby box. But people are asking, the people that know about it are asking, how they can help with the fundraising. And I sort of explained a little bit, didn't give too many details, but that we need this MOU in place. And once we get that in place, then we'll have a place to put the money so that we can, get the project going. So I guess if it's okay, I have a few questions. Is that okay for me to ask a few questions? Yeah? Okay.
Well, yeah, you can ask the questions. We might not have any answers.
Yeah, that's okay.
As you know, this is the point. It's kind of with the city attorney and negotiating.
Yeah, and I just wondered, when Sue Smith and I met with Sue Shell several weeks ago, and the task I was tasked with was to get the fiscal agent, and she was going to work on talking to Ben, the fire chief, and I think it was Joe Eichstead, about a location and contractors. So I was wondering if a site was selected, west side, east side.
Yeah, I can read an email from the fire chief to you on that. Let me find it. So Chief Goudreau, he said on yesterday afternoon.
What's he doing working on Sunday?
He's always working. He's a fire chief.
No.
He said, "Good afternoon. As advised, I have assumed project management responsibilities for this initiative and have spent time working closely with several stakeholders. The project location has been identified and a general contractor has been asked to provide a service quote. City staff were contacted regarding potential involvement but were unable to perform the work. There are a few next steps identified internally as Sue continues to lead the financial contract components of the project. At this time, I do not have any additional updates on the project, but work continues to progress steadily. If there are specific questions or additional details needed, please do not hesitate to reach out to me directly." And there's also an email from Attorney Schill that more directly addresses your question.
Okay.
It states, also city staff has investigated the placement and installation of the cost of the baby boxes, recommended that Station 2 the West Side Station,
Okay,
would be the best location, and a quote was received from a contractor that estimated $11,247 for the cost of installation. It is not a project that can be accomplished by city employees. So those are the two emails we've gotten and
okay.
just over the weekend.
Oh, that's great. Okay, so we don't really know what the criteria was for selecting the West Side. Is it more the anonymity, maybe? I mean, I've never been in the West Side Station, only the East Side, so I don't know what they have there. Yeah, probably.
It's probably got a lot to do with the structure and how the building is set up. I'm sure the engineers did their due diligence in checking everything out.
Okay,
You know, and like I say, that decision sounds like it's still up in the air.
okay,
It sounds like what we need is the city attorney to get that off her desk and get that moving so we can let you start collecting your money and do your part.
yeah, because, I mean, we
Seems
can't
to be
really,
the stopping point. And
yeah, okay. And so you mentioned $11,000. Do we typically just get one quote, or can we get a couple of quotes? Is there anything I can do to help in that arena?
I don't know anything.
I
So
would,
do you know if the 16,000 that was originally proposed as the cost, did that include?
no, that's the cost of the box as far as I can tell
Oh, okay.
from that packet that they gave us.
Okay.
Or that we downloaded from their website. And they estimate, which this was back in probably a couple years, well, 2024, the packet says $5,000 to $7,000. And I'm thinking it's more going to be like $8,000 to $10,000.
Sure.
So maybe 11 seems a little high, but I haven't punched into brick walls ever, so I don't know what that costs to do something like that, so.
Right.
So I'm not familiar, it wasn't included in the email with who went about getting those quotes. I assume, it sounds like Chief Goodrow has taken up the project management
Construction
on
part
this.
of it, okay.
I don't know if he's gotten a quote from more than one place, but with the additional $11,000, if you look at the Safe Haven Baby box, all the information they send out, it is the $15,000 for the box itself and the training and everything else that comes with the 24-hour hotline, those type of things. But the installation itself is not included in that.
Yeah, right.
So,
So
that's what they're looking at right now is the quote that we have now, and I don't know if there's more coming or if
Okay,
there's more
I
than
was,
one
I was
quote.
just
Yeah.
thinking, I wonder if that's just the building, the construction part of it?
The
Does it
installation.
include the electrical work? I mean, that's not in any detail there, right?
Yeah, we don't have the quote, but we can certainly look into that,
Okay,
send out an email and.
okay, yeah, because then we'll kind of have an idea of what we got to shoot for.
Yep.
And maybe there was an option for some kind of donation, if we found somebody that would be willing to donate time or materials or something for that, we could cut the cost.
And I can investigate that, but I don't want to go down that path until I kind of know what Ben, maybe he wants,
I personally don't think it would hurt if you went down that path just to see what you find out, and then we can bring it
okay,
back to Ben and
sure.
see
I
if that'll
will.
work.
Okay, I'll work on that. And does anybody know if there was any communication with city council or, with Sue and the Baby Box Company with their council as far as working on that end of the contract? Nothing? Okay.
I haven't heard anything.
I hadn't heard, so I just wondered if, okay,
I'll speak to that. So we had a closed session meeting on this. It's anything contractual will have to be in closed session.
Yep.
We won't be able to speak on it. So
then that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. And lastly, I just wanted to know, is there, other than working on seeing if somebody would donate time, is there anything else I can be doing in the meantime, or we just wait for the MOU to come out and, okay, because then I'll let Father Schaller know. I'm kind of trying to keep him in the loop a little bit, because, we threw that out there, and now
Yep.
it's, what's going
I know we're pushing Sue to get that MOU. I think it's a fairly standard and easy thing to provide.
okay,
And then the contract part of it obviously is in her hands as well. And once both of those are done, then we're good to fundraise. So
okay, and then
hopefully-
somebody will just let me know
Oh, yeah.
what's up. Okay,
Yep.
great. You got anything else? Okay. Thank you very
Thank you.
much for getting me on tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else on the Safe Haven Baby Box? Okay. So I guess an update from previous meetings we have is we do know now the cost of installation. So something to think about. I mean, we are doing the city budget. We're doing other stuff. So keep that in mind. If fundraising were to not hit a certain goal, if that's something we're interested in, or what path we want to go down. We do know what that costs now, and that it will not be able to be done internally.
We've got a meeting with the city attorney tomorrow afternoon. I'm sure this will come up. We've got a meeting with the city attorney tomorrow afternoon. I'm sure this will come up, and we'll have some answers.
All right, thank you. So on to item 3, which is review and discuss the 2026 budget. I'm going to toss it to the mayor and Mr. DeSorsi.
Sure. On Saturday, I sent out an email that contained the 2026 budget summary, and in that document is all kind of a summary of all the different funds that make up the 26 budget. And I also tried to put some explanation, some highlights of some of the changes in the budget. But as the budget stands right now, if you turn to page 3, that's where I have the property tax levy limit analysis. And I'll just briefly go through. State law requires that we can only raise our levy a certain amount according to the law, and that calculation is detailed there. Basically, we can increase our property tax levy by the amount of net new construction. In 25, we had 1.053% of net new construction, which generated, for the levy limit calculation, 127,744, which is an increase from prior years. As you can see, in 24, we only had 47,000, and 23, 42,000. Then we're allowed to adjust our levy for any debt service. And right now we have a debt service adjustment. We're adding to that is the change in the debt service from last year to this year was about $178,887, which leaves a total allowable increase of $306,631, which leaves a statutory tax levy limit of $14,018,561. As it stands right now, with where the budgets are constructed, our tax levy in the budget is $14,726,000, which leaves us over the levy limit by $707,000. So that's where our work needs to be done, is that we need to reduce those tax levy expenditures to get under the levy limit as we have calculated in the past. On that same sheet, you'll also note that where we just take, for the debt service adjustment year over year, we just take what the change in the debt service was from one year to the next. We don't take our full debt service adjustment. We've always had a capacity that was in the levy limit for times where we might need that money. So as you see scenario B, the debt service adjustment that we could take under the law is $484,000, which would leave a levy limit of $14.3 million, which when you look at the budget with the same structure now, it would leave us with a levy limit deficit of $402,000. So I just kind of wanted, because that's where the budget stands. I don't know how much detail you want me to go into or any items you'd like me to touch on in here. Maybe I'll turn to let's see,
Hey, before we move pages, can you speak to scenario B?
Okay.
Which you just spoke to, lowering the deficit to around 400,000.
Right.
Right below that, it has a tax rate increase.
Right.
So can you speak to that?
Sure. Under scenario A was where we would just adjust for what the change in the debt service. we have an estimated property tax rate of $9.53, which is approximately a 1.89% increase. If we were to elect to take the full debt service adjustment, the tax rate, estimated tax rate would be $9.73 or 4.11%. Now, I should also point out that between scenario A is what our current practice has been in the past budgets, and scenario B is where we would take the full debt service adjustment. But we can, between those two scenarios, we can adjust, that debt service adjustment can be anything we want to make it between the 178,000 and the 484. So I'm just showing the two ranges of the levy limit calculation.
Okay. And anything outside of scenario A would be unprecedented per se? You said
Well-
we don't do this typically.
Well, you know, we've always maintained that capacity. It's kind of like a contingency built into the levy limit. And over the years, we've just chosen not to utilize that capacity in the levy limit. We've always calculated based on what the change, or net new construction plus the change in our debt service. So, but at any point in time, at any budget, we could increase and take the full debt service adjustment if we so chose.
Thank you. And I want to, let's pause right there, and because that's an important point. And that's an important amount of money to try to close this deficit. But it does raise taxes, so if everybody could speak to how they feel about scenario A versus scenario B, that can be one thing that we check off the list of which direction we're going. So historically, we've always done scenario A. If we do scenario B, it's what he spoke to, that it could it would obviously bring in more revenue. Taxes would get raised and the deficit would go down a bit, not completely, but thoughts?
I was just going to ask, obviously it's my first budget cycle. What has the increase been in the tax rate over the last, say, 3 or 4 years? Has it been right around the 1.89 or?
Let me pull that up here.
Thank you.
No problem.
And also that tax rate, the 9.52 or the 9.73 is per 100,000 assessed value?
Per thousand assessed value, $9 per thousand.
1,000,
assessed.
okay.
Yep. Okay, just in 23, the percent increase in the tax rate was 2.07%. In 22, it was 2.91%. In 21, it was 4.67%. But I can supply everyone with showing the history of the tax rate, but those were the last
So the
couple.
1.89 would be relatively low comparative to the previous years?
Yeah.
Okay.
And last year, it's a little misleading because we had the reassessment, so the rate dropped. So
Sure.
it's not an apples-to-apples comparison to like this year or even 23 because of the reassessment.
Okay. And one more, we can go in between scenario A and scenario B, correct? We don't have to pick one or the other?
Correct.
Okay.
I think it would be interesting to look at the wheel tax as well that we talked about.
Do you have any thoughts on scenario A or B?
I'd want to be between it. I don't want to raise the taxes that much, but the wheel tax would be an option to get some of that revenue. If you're including the wheel tax.
We'll get to that. I would not include the wheel tax.
I know.
Mr. Penskover?
I would not be in favor of raising taxes at all. You know, and like Dean said, the wheel tax is something we should look at and at least discuss, you know, and find a little soft spot in there somehow. You know,
Yeah, I mean, it's still asking taxpayers to pay, so, you know, when you look at it, it's kind of washed, I guess, a wash, but I feel like somewhere in the middle of cutting the budget, reducing some things in the budget, and either raising taxes or go towards the wheel tax, but not one or the other, would be my thoughts.
Dennis? Thoughts? Dennis? Your thoughts on scenario A or B? Okay. I'll just speak quickly to my thoughts on it. Obviously, I'm not in favor of raising taxes at all, so it would be scenario A. We're not talking about the wheel tax yet, but I wouldn't be in favor of a wheel tax. I think what we really need to do, and this might be the first time we've had to do this in a long time, but we need to trim back what we've been doing. I mean, that's how we've gotten here. We've met year after year and discussed these things and tried to do some cuts and try to reduce some, try to warn certain departments of what were to come if you can't get your spending under control. We're here now. So I don't think the solution is to enable that. And I mean, even the council voting for that and keep doing that, because eventually you get to a point where how much can you wheel tax? I mean, the tax levy is a pretty set in law thing, and it's time we really look at it and get it together and operate within our means. And everybody just took a lot of people took a giant increase in their taxes with the reassessment to hit them more than usual the next year. It's just too much for me. So I think we need to figure out how to live within our means, which we have struggled to do in the past, and we're gonna have to come to some type of consensus on that. So if everybody can bring ideas after we go through this, we'll talk more, but we gotta work towards that either way, even with
I
those
agree with that.
Tim, can you just give us an update, like how this number fits in with the EMS contracts as they stand right now?
Sure. Let's go to page 19. Built into that deficit is I built in the assumption that the kind of the worst case scenario where the EMS contracts are not renewed, which resulted in, you know, a net decrease in revenues for that fund of about $305,000. Even, you know, and then the EMS expenditures remained relatively flat. As you can see, in there, I'm estimating that it resulted in a reduction in the ambulance contract revenue of about $137,000. Now, we have two existing contracts that run through 27, and those are factored into the revenue, but we have 5 contracts that expire at the end of the year. And you know, with the assumption that if those are not renewed, we lose about $137,000 in contract revenue. Also factored into there is a reduction in revenue of $257,000 because, you know, not only when we service those outlying districts, you know, we are able to bill and collect that revenue, and so our ambulance revenue then would correspondingly decrease to the tune of $257,000. One of the things that helped kind of cushion that reduction is that in 26 we'll receive a Medicare, a supplemental Medicaid reimbursement from the state of Wisconsin through the federal government, and it's a program to reimburse public ambulance services for the cost of Medicaid runs. Right now, when we do a Medicaid run and bill it out, there's a contractual write-off, which results in a lot of write-offs on the amounts that we bill, and we have a lot of Medicaid runs within our district, and so it's estimated to be about $190,000. And what we have to do each year is that we have to report all our expenditures. Then we have to carve out our Medicaid runs and, you know, submit that to the state, and then based on a formula, we get reimbursement. So in 26, we're anticipating getting about $190,000, which help offset some of that revenue, but not in its entirety, which corresponded to the $317,000 increase in the levy to support our EMS operations.
What did you mean by a contractual write-off as opposed to just a write-off?
That's what they call them, because by law, we have to write off. They'll only recognize a certain amount of the, pay us for only, say we bill, $1,000, they'll say, well, we're only going to recognize 400 of that. And so they'll pay us for 400, but we have to write off. We can't go to the patient and collect the difference. So we have to, by law, write it off.
So right now, the numbers we're talking about outside of the raising of the taxes for that difference, the numbers we're looking at include or do not include, they do not include the contracts, the contracted areas for the EMS. Okay, thank you.
Tim, is there any more money coming in from the state that's not in here, or you anticipate any money coming in?
All the annual, outside of like specific grants that we might apply for, and any monies that we receive from the state to support our annual operations are contained in the budget. If we were to, say, apply for a grant for a special project, well, that's when, every once in a while you'll see one of my resolutions that'll say, we applied for this grant, got this money, and we'll recognize that money. But then we have the expenditure, it goes to fund the expenditure, but the expenditure's not in the budget. It's a special project. Any reoccurring state payments are contained in the 26 budget. Some of the state aids that we receive from the state of Wisconsin is our connecting and general transportation aids. Those went up slightly, approximately $23,000. Our shared revenue and shared revenue supplemental aid went up $135,000 for our shared revenue program and $31,000 for our supplemental aid. And those were pretty much the increases that we saw there. Our recycling grant that we get from the Wisconsin DNR is usually flat at $72,000 a year. We also receive exempt computer and personal property aid. If you remember last year, they exempted all personal property, but to make all the municipalities whole, they calculated what that lost revenue was, and we get that on an annual basis, and you'll see in the budget that for our personal property exemption, we receive $536,000. But you'll also remember that when they exempted that, they made us reduce our levy so that we couldn't double dip on the state aid payment and then what was already built into the levy. So as part of the levy limit calculation, they made us subtract off that value of the personal property, and then they made that up with a payment that we get each year.
So basically what you're saying then is the figures we're looking at right here probably aren't going to change
From the state aids? No,
right.
yeah, those are estimates that the state provided us and are incorporated into the budget.
Okay, thank you.
All right, you just want to keep going through highlights?
Just to kind of go through some of the revenue side, because I think we'll be going through the expenditure side with the departments, and then those are in the departmental budgets, but just kind of give some highlights on the revenue side. If you read those, I tried to point out not a lot of big decreases. The one bigger decrease of $63,000 was the property tax equivalent. That's the payment that we get from Water and Light. It's a PSC calculation, and that calculated out to be about $63,000. And basically what it is we get reimbursed, or they make a payment to us based on the book value of their utility plant, both the electric and water, and they apply the local and school rate to that. But one of the things that they do is when they take the book value of their utility plant, they use our assessment ratio, and they ratio it down, and then the rates are applied. Our assessment ratio decreased from 94.5% in 25 to about 88%. So that means that market value, the equalized value of properties are going up again compared to last year. And so now we're at 88% as an assessment ratio. So, and 90% is once you fall below 90%, you're technically out of compliance and you have 3 years to do a reassessment to get it back into compliance. But, you know, usually it's after 3 years, they give us notice and then you look at doing a reassessment, but that can change because then if market values or equalized values decrease, then that ratio would go up. Relatively, one thing is parking fines violations decreased 18,000. That's because, you know, with the on-street park change and off-street park, we just don't have the tickets that we used to in that.
What was that? What'd you say? I'm sorry.
Parking violations are down, mostly probably because of, you know, when we had the alternate side parking and stuff, I think there were a lot of tickets issued. Now that's not. One of the things I like to point out is our interest earnings. Went up slightly.
What page?
Oh, I'm sorry, page 11.
Okay.
This is we have our reserves and all the funds that we invest. And we generate a significant revenue source out of there to support the budget. You see investment earnings of $732,000. Now, what I try to do is I try to estimate what our earnings are going to be for next year, but then as part of that estimate, I have to determine what investment rates are going to be. And I tend to be rather conservative with that because interest rates can move dramatically depending on, you know, the economy and stuff. So I usually am like overly conservative with that, you know, for the primary reason is that interest rates can drop rather dramatically. And when they drop, that revenue source drops. So I tend to be conservative so that if we get an interest rate environment that starts to drop, that we have a little bit of cushion in that number where it's not impacting just one budget cycle. We have multiple cycles to maybe cushion the blow of losing that revenue. I remember there was a time our reserves weren't quite as high, but where we generated just $90,000 in investment earnings because investments earnings were very, very, very low, like 25 basis points. Charges for service, the main there is our landfill revenue is picking up, so I projected increase there. Macmillan Library on page 13. You'll see their operating expenditures increased $44,000. However, you'll see general property taxes increased $113,000. And that was primarily due that in the 25 budget, they applied $200,000 of the reserves that they accumulated over the past number of years to support the 25 budget. However, when you apply reserves for operating, that's a one-time use of that revenue. So, you know, as you'll see there in fund balance applied, it goes from 200,000 to zero, which kind of corresponds into the increase in the general property taxes to support the library operations. However, you'll see in the Wood County Library aid, that loss of that the reserves to support the budget was offset by, you know, partially offset by the increase in library, Wood County Library aid of $154,000. Let's see. The Centralia Center Fund, it's pretty much, you'll see a decrease of $17,000 in the levy. We have a slight decrease in the expenditures there. And a slight increase in the lease revenue because we have built into the leases a cost of living inflationary adjustment. So those went up slightly, but relatively the Centralia Center shows a decrease in the levy of $17,000. The Emergency Medical Service Fund, we just talked about that. This assumes that the contracts aren't renewed, but obviously if those contracts are currently being discussed with the other jurisdictions, if new contracts are approved, then obviously that'll change this budget dramatically. Do you want to give an update or no?
Tim just asked if I wanted to give an update. I have met with Chief Goudreau, and I have met with all the leadership, and then we met with, and that's for even the two for in 28, 26, 27. Yeah, that come due in 28. We've met with 4 of the complete council, so there's 3 more to go that we're working on. There's lots of questions out there. I can't, it seems that there's a general support and understanding of it, but it doesn't mean that that equates to everybody agreeing to it at this point in time. So it's kind of up in the air in the sense that I don't have an answer for it, but it has been well received, and they seem to understand where we're coming from. And again, it's not an apples to apples comparison anymore when it comes to the, they have a choice to make, whether they're going with a private entity at a much lesser price, or they want to continue our services for double the price, but also for the services that we are capable of giving them. So I guess ultimately that doesn't tell you one way or the other. It remains to be seen still, but it's definitely been well received. Thank you.
On page 22, you'll have the room tax fund, and this is the 8% tax that our hotels generate for room tax. Of the money that we collect, 70% goes to the Wisconsin Rapids Areas Conventions Bureau. 18.75% funds our park department outlay, and 11.25% funds economic development. The economic development monies is what we use to make the $25,000 annual payment to the Heart of Wisconsin for economic development. I'm projecting a decrease in the amount of room tax that we're collecting. Right now, currently, we're down about 4.6% from 24. The second quarter of 25, we're down 4.6 from the second quarter of 24. So you'll see a corresponding reduction in that revenue and obviously the corresponding expenditure accounts. Yes.
Oh, sorry. So regarding room tax expenditures, we send about 70% of it to the Convention and Visitors Bureau. It's, as it states, 18.75 to park department outlay, and the rest economic development, which is Chamber of Commerce, etc. What are our abilities to play with those percentages and change where those funds get allocated to potentially offset or do something different within our own budget?
Well, the 70%, state law says that you have to spend X percent, 70% on tourism. So either we would have to actually use it for tourism type activities, or we've designated the Visitors and Conventions Bureau as our tourism entity, and then that's why they get 70%. So really the 30% is the amount that we have where it's up to the discretion of the city or the council to how they want to allocate those funds.
And do any cities do their own tourism from that? Like, for example, people come from all around the area to go to the Aquatic Center and to Whitterfield and to some of these things that we have within the Parks Department. Is any of that included in what the state would consider tourism?
Yeah, we'd have to look at the statutory definition of what that is and probably get some guidance on what would be considered tourism and stuff. So I don't know offhand exactly what would qualify for what the city does that would qualify for tourism.
Okay.
Tim, are you saying that 70%, is that, who set that? Or did you say the state has?
Right, the state law regarding room tax says that X percent has to go towards tourism, and so that's why that 70% goes to the Visitors and Conventions Bureaus, because they're we designate them as our tourism entity, and that's where the payments go.
No, there's no way that that can be cut down then, is what you're saying.
Well, you have to spend 70% on tourism-related activities. And just in answering Alderperson Catnaw's previous question is I'm not familiar with exactly what would define tourism activities. We'd have to look into that specifically to determine, you know, if we were going to do something different, what those activities would be and if they would qualify under the state statutes.
And of course, the state doesn't give us any help with that either, do they?
Well, it's an interpretation of the state statutes,
I
and
know,
sometimes
I
that can
know.
be rather challenging. I'm just going to walk through the funds here and just give a brief overview. Page 24, you have the Wisconsin Rapids Community Media Fund. That's in a separate fund because it's supported primarily through the franchise fees. Both Solaris and Charter are required to remit to us a franchise fee. Right now, those fees through the second quarter, just kind of like room tax, are down about 4.37%. So I'm estimating a reduction in the franchise fees about $8,250. Ultimately, the community media expenditures are down. Part of that reduction is that in the 25 budget, when our information systems department oversaw Wisconsin Rapids Community Media, we allocated 15% of our IT managers' wages and benefits to this fund. However, when the decision was made that the information systems department would no longer oversee Wisconsin Rapids Community Media, in the 26 budget, 100% of the IT managers' wages and benefits are budgeted in the IT department, and then obviously is a reduction in the Wisconsin Rapids Community Media operating budget, no longer reflecting that 15% of those wages and benefits. So ultimately, at the end of the day, you got about a $9,000 increase in the levy to support this fund. The next one on page 26 is the Mass Transit Fund. This is the program we have to run our,
Can I take a step back just
Sure.
to WRCM there? So the franchise fee does not cover that $9,055?
yeah, the franchise fees don't cover the total cost of the department. We get, you got the franchise fees, plus then you got the video service provider
Mm-hmm.
aid, and that was, I can't remember, it's a number of years ago, but when there was a state law that reduced the amount of the franchise fees, and that payment kind of makes up for that a little bit. So, but, those two revenue sources don't fund the entire operations, and that's why you see the levy amount of $35,000.
Okay, thanks.
I don't think this is a question anybody can answer here, but as Wisconsin Rapids Community Media operates as their own channel or entity or however you want to word that, how do they get themselves on like a YouTube TV or a Hulu Live or like all these other subscriptions that people are leaving Spectrum and Solaris for, which is part of why there's a decrease. Can they advertise themselves to them or approach them and try to get on? And like I said, I don't think anybody knows that, but if they're listening, maybe they could look into that.
Well, Joe is in the back room there. I know that we are on most of those platforms already, and we are working towards increasing viewership. Again, they don't pay you anything until you get to a certain level of
Okay.
viewers. Assuming we're working within the confines of Wisconsin Rapids and the surrounding area, 40,000 people to get on our stuff. I don't know how many people will be watching us outside of that. Unless we're really entertaining, then maybe they'll want.
Yeah, we better step it up.
Yeah, but ultimately there's no revenue from them, but I don't think there's any expense unless we start pushing out advertising, and we're not doing that as of yet.
Yep.
Page 26 is our mass transit fund, and this is the grant program that supports our cab service in town. We contract with Running Inc. to provide that service. You'll see an increase in the expenditures of approximately $88,000, and that's due to the contractual per hour rate increases from $36.49 per driver hour to $37.55 in '26. The program is set up where federal and state aids, we receive monies from both the federal and the state, account for about 56.5% of they'll fund 56.5% of the operating expenditures. And so you'll see an increase in the revenue along with the operating revenues of $130,970. You're actually seeing a decrease in the property tax levy for that fund of about $42,900, and that's primarily due to, if you remember, earlier this year we increased the agency fares for the program, and we're starting to see an increase in that revenue source, and so that helped fund the impact of both the increase in the contractual rate. So,
On that, Tim?
Yep.
So the 1.5 million total budget, only 272,000 of property taxes pays for that?
correct.
And do we get ever anything on the ridership of that program? Do we get information on how many people are riding it and using it, or hours being used, anything like that?
Yeah.
Okay.
We can- Excuse me. On page 28 is the retiree health insurance fund. This is a fund that benefits within our current policies and some of the labor contracts provide for upon retirement. You get retiree health insurance partially paid for. Right now, the levy to support that is decreasing about $9,126. As you can see, our expenditures are about $435,000 and offset by contributions from the retirees. So that's remained relatively flat. I should point out that, it's relatively flat, but still about $129,000 plus about $200,000 comes from the budget to support or to pay for those benefits, and about $219,000 comes from the retirees for that. The Stormwater Utility Fund. This is the fund that we have a stormwater utility fee that pays for the maintenance and construction of storm sewer, our maintenance of street sweeping, curb and gutter maintenance, storm sewer maintenance, and any special storm detention ponds that the fee goes to support. Right now, I'm not projecting an increase or for '26 in that fee. We had reserves in that fund that we were able to apply to the budget of $306,000. So I didn't want to, propose a fee increase when we had revenues already or funds already in the stormwater utility fund to fund that. But it could be, depending on future expenditures, it could be something that may need to be looked at in the '27 budget to determine, because the reserves will be pretty much exhausted at that point. And so we may have to look at it, but that all depends on, what the level of '27 expenditures are going to be. Another thing that helped it is that the storm sewer construction, you'll see decrease about $250,000 for the '26, and that's primarily due to the storm sewer for the East Jackson Street project is being funded through Tax Incremental District number 7. Witter Park Aquatic Center Fund, a slight increase in the property tax levy of $5,824. Right now with the operations, we're we're looking at, and the admissions, the property tax supports the water park to the tune of about $158,000. Sure, the admissions and all the revenues for that remain relatively flat. We're seeing a little bit of a decrease in just the admissions for that, and, you know, a lot of things can affect that, like the weather and things like that. You know, our concession and rental revenue obviously made up for any of the decrease in the admissions revenue, but ultimately it's about a $5,800 increase in the levy for the '26 budget. And also in the budget, I also, to point out is that we have a maintenance reserve. So each year we budget $20,000. We don't necessarily have anything specified in the '26 budget to use those funds for, but it's one of our accounts where we're accumulating money so that at some point in the future, if we have to do major repairs or replace a pump, we have the funds available to do that.
And I just wanted to note something, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but
Mhm.
for anything to do with the aquatic center and the admission prices, the concessions, the rentals, all to do with this are all under the Park and Rec Commission. That's not us. We can't, you know, play with those numbers or try to increase them as the council. That goes through Parks and Rec.
Page 34 is the Transportation Utility District Fund. If you recall, we created the transportation utility and ran it for a couple of years, but then it was determined it was suspended due to an appeals court ruling. Right here reflects probably the last year that we'll have this budget. The reserves in the fund are being utilized to help fund the pavement replacement program. For the '26 budget, we have about $343,000 budgeted for that program, of which the residual reserves in the transportation utility of $263,000 will be utilized to fund that. And then we also, as part of the pavement replacement program, any degradation fees that the city collects, we utilize to fund that program. Going forward, obviously, we will not have, other than the degradation fees of the tune of $80,000, we won't have a revenue source to fund this program. So it'll be something in the 2027 budget to determine, you know, how we're going to fund that program going forward.
Question on that. We haven't seen since that ruling be any litigation regarding funds already collected.
Nope.
So the ruling happened, and just going forward, you can't have a transportation utility, but there's not going to be anything retroactive.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, thank you.
All right, on page 36 is the Public Works Construction Fund. This is the fund that we use for all our street construction, sanitary sewer construction, water main construction, traffic control. I think the biggest, one thing I want to point out is the Public Works Construction Fund is proposed to a $1,115,000 general obligation debt to fund the street construction projects, those being 2nd Street North, Spring Street to Pleasant View Drive, 16th Street South, Peach to Oak Street, Lakewood Lane to Whitrock Street, the concrete pavement maintenance rehabilitation program. That's what we usually utilize for the expressway and all our concrete streets. And then the sidewalk construction of $340,000. And then obviously associated with that, when you issue general obligation debt, there's cost associated with that of $62,000. That's just an estimate. So, and that adds up to the $1,115,000 general obligation debt issue to support those projects. As you can see, the levy only increased $5,000 to support the fund. Right now, we have a tax levy in the fund of about $90,000. there's any questions regarding any of those. And if you recall, in the 25, in this year's budget, the 25 budget, we utilized some of those favorable investment earnings that we got and transferred them into from the general fund to the public works, and we used some transportation utility money of $185,000. And if you recall, in the 25 budget, we were originally estimated that we'd have a $1,375,000 general obligation. With those favorable investment earnings and reserves and transportation utility, we were able to reduce that down to a $725,000 state trust fund loan this year. Any questions on that one?
No questions, but thank you for the note of why there's such a decrease. I mean, I think that's important to know.
On page 39 is the tax incremental district number 6 fund. This is the Rapids East Commerce Center. This fund will be closed out in 26. We make our final debt issue payment of $178,609. So we issued bonds way back when we established the park. Those funded all the infrastructure to extend it out to there. So that we'll make that final debt payment, and the fund will be closed in 26. And there'll be a slight surplus of approximately, what did I say in here? $80,000 surplus is projected. That will be divvied up between all the taxing jurisdictions on a pro rata basis, and the fund will be closed. I will be doing a calculation, because when you close a fund, they allow you to adjust your levy limit by a certain percentage of the increment in that fund, because now all that value is going back into for the general tax rate calculation, and they allow you to recapture a portion of that increment. And right now, the increment in there is about $300,000, and it's roughly like 50% of that. So that could be something where a levy adjustment, a favorable levy adjustment in the 27 budget could help. So, tax incremental district number 7, that's our downtown TID. If you recall, this year we amended the TIF plan. For right now, the TIF is performing very well. It's generating approximately $522,000 of increment each year. We really didn't have any other than the Riverwall project, rehabilitation project, we really didn't have any other projects that were on the horizon that we'd able to use that favorable increment for. And we're coming up on the end of the expenditure period at the end of 27. So we amended the TIF project plan because we knew the Lincoln Street project was on the city's radar, and it services part of that street is within the TIF district. We revised the project plan because we wanted to include that project, but we also, you're allowed to have a half-mile radius outside for any infrastructure outside the TIF district. So we were going to incorporate that entire project into the TIF and use it to use the TIF increment that's being generated through 2033 to pay for that project. So that was we were very thankful to the Joint Review Board for approving that project plan, because that took that project off the general levy and was able to pay through it for the TIF. Now, obviously, when you look at the street, Lincoln Street of $2.3 million, it's proposed that we issue a long general obligation debt to fund that $2.4 million, or tune of $2.4 million for that, and that'll be over a probably 5 to 7 year term on that. And the reason why we have to issue debt to do that is because that increment is going to be gradually be recaptured from 26 through 2033, but obviously we're expending the $2.3 million for the Lincoln Street project, and that's why you see that debt issue. But the principal and interest on that debt issue will not affect our debt service tax levy because of the increment being utilized to pay for it. The only way it would impact us if for some reason the equalized value in that district dropped dramatically over the next couple of years, but right now the trend is that we're generating over $500,000 in increment, and it's we're able to utilize that to fund this project, as well as the railroad optimization project if approved, and then obviously the Riverwall rehabilitation project.
Tim, so does that mean that we would be creating a new TID? Because you said the expenditure period's ending.
Right.
But we would go to debt issuance and pay through 2030, whatever. So does that mean we're planning to open another TID for that?
No, when you establish a TID, they have an expenditure period.
Yeah.
And so that expenditure period ends in 27, and the only expenditures you're allowed after that through the revenue period for the TIF extends out to 2033, but the expenditures extends to 2027.
Okay.
And the only expenditures you're allowed is administrative, like we have to have certain financial audits at certain benchmarks in the TIF, and also principal and interest. You're allowed to utilize that increment past the expenditure period for debt service payments.
Got it. Thank you.
And you see for the Riverwall project, we will have, I estimate, we'll have about $1 million in fund balance in there at the end of this year, and that's being applied in the budget to partially pay for the Riverwall project. Page 44 is the tax incremental district number 8. That is the Metelco property that we developed that TID for basically for to extend the rail across from the Rapids East Commerce across 48 to service the Metelco development. And then as part of that development, we had an agreement where we paid them $150,000 a year. This year will be the last year for that payment. The one project that was in the project plan that we'll be undertaking next year is reconstructing 48th Street for the section that is within the TIF district. And basically after that is complete, there will be no more expenditures in that TIF district. And that will be closed probably in 27, maybe even 26, depending. So, and the same thing applies there. We generate about $492,000 of increment. Page 46 is our equipment replacement fund. This is the fund where we annually put aside a certain amount of funds, the tune of $291,000 of tax levy money to fund various replacement accounts. Some of the replacement accounts is information technology. We put $55,000 a year into that to replace computers throughout the city and computer-related equipment. We also, in there is to fund servers and any network hardware that we have. Engineering department, $9,000 is placed in there for survey equipment, also some office equipment for the plotters that we use to print our maps and things like that. The office equipment, that $20,000 is the depreciation on our copier machines, and so basically incorporated into all the copying line items you'll see in the operating budgets, we include a depreciation amount in those budgets, and we recapture those so that when we have to replace the copiers, we can purchase them outright and we don't have to lease them. If you remember, we just replaced our copiers, was that this year, earlier this year or last year? I can't remember. Last year, and we were able to purchase those and not lease them, and then thus avoiding any of the financing costs associated with that. Police department, those are for the replacement of vehicles. They're on I think the patrol ones are on a 2-year replacement cycle, maybe 2 to 3 year replacement cycle, and the admin vehicles are a little bit longer than that for obvious reasons. So that's the amount that we budget each year to replace those vehicles. Fire department vehicles, we use this fund, and we put $47,500 annually to replace fire department vehicles, not necessarily the fire engines, but more of the command staff or any major repairs. As you know, that we ordered a ladder truck, a $1.5 million ladder truck. This fund isn't meant to obviously pay for something like that. This is more for the smaller vehicles that they have, or if they have a major repair that we can utilize this fund for that. You'll see the expenditure for 26 is 104,000. That includes the 47,500 that we're putting in there for our annual contribution to the replacement, and also they're replacing a command staff car. Street department fleet, you see $699,000. That represents the amount of depreciation that we have on our public works fleet. And we use that depreciation when we build that into our internal equipment rates. So throughout the budget, you'll see a line item in the maintenance accounts and constructions equipment. And so when we take our equipment and use it for a specified purpose, we charge that budget an hourly rate for that equipment. And then that's to pay for not only the maintenance and fuel for that piece of equipment, but also includes a depreciation. We recapture that depreciation. It goes into this account, and then that's what we use to fund any future equipment purchases. So when Paul comes to the finance committee to purchase a certain piece of equipment, this is the account that's coming from. I think that's all for that one.
So go back to that street department fleet again. So
Mhm.
on the actual 2024, the 629,
Mm-hmm.
and then the actual as of now is 801. So explain why we're budgeting 1.3.
Well, we're budgeting 699,000. The last year's budget included a carryover
Oh,
that was,
You
we
said that.
applied some of the funds that were already in that budget, because you'll see down below in the
Yep.
revenue, you'll see the 802 of
I
balance,
remember
fund
now.
balance applied.
I remember we talked about this before. Yep. Okay, thanks.
No problem. And the last fund is the sewer utility fund of the wastewater department. Just kind of go through, we're seeing about, I kind of projected some of the revenues based on, our current trends. We're seeing a little bit of a decrease. I mean, some of the revenues are up this year, but the 24 revenues that the 25 budget was based on, we saw some reductions in those 24 revenues. So now we're just kind of, even though that they're going up a little bit, since that 25 budget number was based on what we thought the 23 revenues and 24s were going to be, we're seeing a decrease in some of the industrial service agreements revenues, the leachate. And a lot of times what can happen too is if they have exceedances or a certain special where they get billed or exceedance charges, that might inflate a revenue in any one given year. It doesn't mean that they have that each year. We have the municipal service agreements. Right now, we have a tentative agreement with the Village of Buren to make quarterly payments for $42,500 until we have the rate study done, and then until we come up with a rate that both parties agree on. So the revenue's just based on that quarterly payment, and Village of Rudolph, approximately $74,000 is their charge. Operating expenditures, 122,000 increase. A good chunk of that is a $95,000 decrease in the depreciation on their capital assets. One of the things I should point out is in 2026, it's proposed that they're going to, the West Interceptor and Gaynor Avenue rehabilitation project, they're going to do a lining project for those. The city applied for a Clean Water Fund loan to fund that project. It's to the tune of $5,850,000. So if you go to page 50, you'll see the non-cash outflows. You'll see the West Side Interceptor project of $5 million, but then it's offset by, we'll have some debt proceeds from the Clean Water Fund loan, and then that'll be that'll be paid off, obviously, through principal and interest payments in the future. Also, as part of that, there's a possibility that through the Clean Water Fund Loan Program that we might qualify and receive some loan forgiveness. If you recall, in 2018, when we took out a Clean Water Fund loan for the West Side lift station rebuild, we got about $700,000 in loan forgiveness. So we'll see. You know, it looks like it's very favorable that we might receive it. It's not a given, but that'll help reduce the amount of that Clean Water Fund loan. Right now,
when will we know that?
once we just, at the end of September, we just submitted the application, so I don't know what the timeline is for, you know, obviously we won't progress with the project until we know if we were approved for the loan, or, and then at that time, I'm sure we'll be aware
Okay.
of any loan forgiveness. Right now for 26, I'm not anticipating any rate increase. Obviously, each year that'll have to be analyzed. The one good thing about with bringing on the, you know, obviously in 2027, assuming this project goes in 26 and is completed in 26, we'll have obviously principal and interest payments related to the Clean Water Fund loan for this project. The good thing is that the original, the 2008 Clean Water Fund loan for when we did the BOD expansion at the plant will be paid off in 2028. So even though we're bringing on some new debt payments in the very near future, we'll have our largest debt payment drop off and be paid off. So. I know I went through that kind of quick. It's just, but any questions, I'll be happy to answer. Or, you know, if there's any, you know, throughout this process, if there's any specific information that you'd like to see, just let me know. And I'll try to put it together for you.
Tim, I just had one quick question as we were going through this. Back to page 10, it says payment in lieu of taxes. What is that?
We have certain organizations that a lot of times if they receive, like non-for-profits, if they receive sometimes federal grants or something like that, they're required to make a payment in lieu of tax. So there's, I think, 3 entities that we actually receive an amount. It's just, they kind of say, this is what we're going to pay each year, and that's what we get. So,
And they own property in town?
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, but they're tax exempt properties.
Right.
Tim, where in this budget, the salaries and benefits that we pay employees, what page is that on in here? Or where does that money come from?
Well, all the wages and benefits for our workforce is spread up, you know, throughout the budget in the individual department budgets. So if you go through the departmental budgets, you'll see wages and all the associated benefits and things like that. Are you interested in like the total amount, or?
Well, no, you probably answered it. I mean, it's.
Right, so,
I know what you're saying. I was just.
Yeah, if you reference the departmental budgets where, you know, each, like, you got the finance department, police department, fire department, you'll see in there like wages, and then, you know, Wisconsin retirement, FICA, health insurance, dental insurance, those are all line items in those, specifically in those budgets. This document is the total of the departmental budget. So like for finance, it's just the total of the finance budget in this summary document, but in the departmental, those are itemized in the departmental budget.
Well, then, who determines the percentages that you're going to be putting in? I mean, like,
Sure.
you just settled a contract with 2 departments. And
Right, yeah, so the police and fire department budgets, they have a 3.5% contractual 2026 wage increase. That's factored into this budget. For all the other non-represented, I have about a 2.5% factored into the budget, and that's in the contingency account. It's not in the individual departmental accounts because those have not been up for consideration and or approved.
Okay, thank you.
So Tim, there is no, that 2.5% is not part of this deficit.
It is.
It is.
It's in the contingency account.
Okay, so what is that amount?
I'll show you right where it is.
And what you were just referencing is
Right.
the draft from September 30th.
Yeah, right. If you go to page 9 of the document that we've been going through, you'll see a contingency of 201,537.
So that is the 2.5% or the COLA for the non-union.
For the amount that affects the tax levy. So there's various contingency accounts for like the stormwater utility fee, wastewater, because those are funded through those fees, not the tax levy. But the amount that affects the tax levy is the 201,000. The total cost is about 274,000 for the workforce.
So the potential COLA would be 274,000.
Right, but all of that is not funded with the tax levy. That's what
But it's in the budget as part of the deficit. Yeah.
100,000, 201, that contingency account is what's part of the deficit. Because the deficit only includes, when we're talking about the property, the 704,000, that's the levy, property tax levy deficit. And so, but not all funds, like your tax incremental districts, they're not affected by the property taxes, they're not funded by that. Our stormwater utility fee is not funded by any part of that is funded by the tax levy, so they're not included in that deficit figure.
Because, for example, employees go over there and do work, and then it's funded through that.
Right.
So the total is 274, 70,
Right.
73 of it is when they're working in tax
Right.
incremental districts, but overall. The other, I emailed you these, but I'll just
Sure.
put them out there so everyone to know. What the impact would be if we implemented a hiring freeze. You had just recently sent me that of what open positions we have and what the cost is for those. And an email I sent to Tim that he's still working on, and he got a response to me, but I asked what it would look like to do a continuation of the 2025 budget into 2026, which would only apply to certain parts of the budget, as the projects are different, and it's, as Tim said, it's not apples to apples, but just what it would look like if we just took last year's budget, the parts of it we can, and continue it into 2026. And I don't think it's an easy number to just come up with, so I asked for that, and we'll see what we get from that. But otherwise, I think that was a good overview, and we got some work to do to figure the rest out. All right, any more questions on item 3, which is review and discuss the budget? Any questions for Tim or the mayor?
Nothing here. Thank you, Tim.
Thanks, Tim.
Yes, thank you. And I encourage everyone to, as you're going through and you're coming up with ideas or have questions, just reach out, and we got to try to do it as fast as we can. We'll move on to item 4 then, which is next meeting reminder. So the next one that we had scheduled or talked about scheduling was the review of the public safety budget for Tuesday, October 28th at 5 o'clock. So I mean, we have flexibility there if we want to take a different direction and talk more about the budget in total and have more a working meeting going through things, or if we do want to bring them in and hear their budgets and go through it with them, we can keep it as is. But that was the next scheduled meeting, and that was going to be the purpose. So,
I'm in favor of that, just keeping
I'm in
the,
favor of
yep.
doing it. Let them,
Yeah.
let them come in and
all right, so the next meeting of the Property and Finance will then be at Tuesday, October 25th, 5 p.m. And I got to go through my notes.
October 28th.
28th, yeah, 28th. My apologies. Got to go through my notes or that sheet we got of where the meeting will exactly be down here because of the availability of the council chambers.
And that's public safety then.
Yep, public safety.
Okay.
And what I'll be doing is, you know, assuming that the council approves the health insurance premium rates from Wisconsin Counties Association, I'll update all the departmental budgets and then give you a fresh department budgets for those meetings.
What do you have in there now?
I took the liberty of just making an assumption that they would be approved so that the
Okay,
4.88% is factored into the budget.
okay,
That's why you saw that deficit kind of shrink a little bit from the original one of 854 to 702. As part of that is the reduction in the health insurance because I originally had factored in the 8% renewal that we got from our current health insurance provider. So I factored that into there.
so you factored in
The
what
four-
we might do.
Right.
Okay.
And then, as always, it's like as I get more information in, be looking at revenue estimates. So as we get new information in, I'll hopefully maybe see some favorable increases in revenue sources based, you know, from my original estimate. So I'm gonna do another hard dive into the ambulance revenue, you know, and look into that. And as we get some other information in, hopefully maybe revise some of those. Hopefully it goes in a positive direction.
All right. Well, thank you. Oh, go ahead.
Just wanted to get some clarity or feedback on, there's a few positions right now that we've kind of just been holding off on filling. Probably 3 to 4. We'll have another one coming up. Obviously, the department heads, you know, want to fill them immediately. Any feedback?
I guess for me, it would depend which departments and cost or something. Can you put that out to everybody?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, you're going to be looking at somewhere between 80 and 100 for each of the positions with everything. So, again, the worst, you know, I don't want to hire people and then all of a sudden have to look at, you know, staffing issues. So,
I have the number. It's about 300,000.
In addition to what's in the already negative?
Well, I believe they're
Or the-
budgeted.
Okay, they're budgeted. Okay.
So, yeah.
so
This
it'd
would
be
be-
lowering the, yeah.
If we essentially enacted a hiring freeze, these positions, if they were removed from the budget, would be 300,000.
I guess my thoughts are maybe just wait till we get through this budget process. I don't know. Because that's an option to,
The options there, I mean, and we can talk about, you know, if need be, to combine. They're all clerical staffing, administration, so that there's possibilities that can be talked about.
What I had said to Tim in an email is, I mean, we'll see how this all plays out over the next few weeks, but potentially removing them from the budget and then based on how the year goes, they could go back in with a budget amendment. But there's so much to see how everything goes yet and what direction the council want to goes in, what developments happen and that are currently working out, and it's tough to say, but so as of right now, I think is what he's asking. The thoughts are to,
I would say wait.
okay.
Still a lot of numbers to be figured out before that, so,
Yep.
okay, I'll let them know.
All right.
Thank you for your support.
Anything else? All right. Thank you all for your time. Meeting adjourned at 6:25 PM.